far north Queensland being so volatile, I thought there would be so many contingency plans in place. Don't we rely on the council and the government bodies to keep us safe? As a society, we have to work together to ensure the safety and well-being of everybody.
Yeah, I was surprised there was no plan. I really thought that there would be one.
Unfortunately, I even find that the attitudes of people is just like, oh, what can you do? Won't happen again, or how can we? But I just don't think like that. I think that a plan, any plan, is better than no plan. The Cairns Northern Beaches has a south end and a north end. It consists of Palm Cove, Kiwara, Clifton Beach, Trinity Beach, Yorkeys Knob, Holloways and Machins. The north end is very touristy. There are a lot of holiday apartments and it gets quite busy. Yorkeys Knob to Machins is more like these laid-back country beaches where people are super chill. It's an enjoyable place to live. People like to ride their bikes to the beach with a few beers to watch the sunset, and it's abundant in wildlife with so many variety of birds. The kookaburras are like backyard pets. Up here, you're on far north Queensland time.
But the northern beaches were built in the Barron River Delta. I think we had years to plan for this.
Looking up information about the Barron River, I came across like this extract or a sort of like a research paper about a research paper, and it was about the Barron River Delta investigation. So at the bottom it said, oh, you can go and find that book at the Cairns Historical Society. So I went down there today to the Historical Society, found the book. Of course, there's all these rules, like there's copyright laws, say I can't actually show you the evidence of it. I can only write down and collect the data and sort of put this together in a way that makes sense.
As a resident of Holloways Beach, I was shocked by what I read. The Barron River has a very rich history. In 1973 to 1979, dredging was very common in the river. They were taking out 78,000 cubic metres of sand and gravel a year. It was recommended that dredging did not exceed 20,000 cubic metres a year.
It's important that if you watch this video that you watch the whole thing from start to finish so that you don't miss sections of information and then get the message wrong of what I'm saying in the video. No conclusions can be drawn from this video because further research would have to be done into every bit of detail that I'm giving right now. The information just sort of highlights that it's a very large, complicated issue, the River Delta, and that I'm hoping that somebody who is smarter and somebody who is actually studying this type of thing will be able to do a full investigation on the River Delta and what's going to happen going forward. Reading the investigation has left me with more questions than answers. It's just like never-ending questions of wondering, you know, what sequence of events led to where we are today. When did planning, permits and laws come in to say, hey, like, you know, we're not going to build in these sections and you have to build your house to the 1% AEP flood. I can only provide information on a very basic level. It would take like hours and hours and hours of research to like piece this whole thing together, of how we've gotten to where we are now and what we need to do to move forward in the future to ensure the safety of the residents of the beaches. I just hope that one day a full investigation will be done that helps prevent some of the future issues that we may be facing. There's some changes that I would like to see happening in the near future, so I'll be emailing BOM, the council, the disaster management team, government bodies, council members, whoever I have to message to get some of these like things fixed, just to help the residents.
The report of the Barron River Delta investigation was developed by the Department of Harbours and Marine. It was published in 1981. A summary of the foreword is that the Barron River is still very actively building its delta by bringing sand and gravel and other sediments downstream in times of flood. Not only is the sand and gravel important in the delta's building, but also in its demand to supply concrete and road construction concrete. Frequent flooding causes hardship to residents by flooding houses and farms. In order to understand how these factors interact, the Queensland Government established a committee to investigate the problems occurring. Due to the lack of information collected on the Delta, the committee was obligated to do an extensive research to fix these issues. Quote, I would argue those authorities responsible for planning the Delta's future to use the results of this most comprehensive study to the maximum possible extent to guide them in planning future works in the Delta. From the Minister of Northern Development and Maritime Services. The aim and the objective of the study was to study the water flow, how sediments travel, stability of the beaches, stability of the banks of the river, safe extraction rate from the river, and flooding of the Delta. The issues found were that there was a lack of rules and monitoring of the dredging that was happening, which could lead to weakening of the river and flooding occurring. It was recommended that no dredging be done on the Tomatoes Creek whatsoever, as they were dredging 3,000 cubic metres at the time. With so much to explain, I thought it might be easier if I just brought up a map. The Barron River Delta starts here at the freshwater. It goes to Yorkeys Knob, down to the Cairns Airport. The Barron River mouth is over here near Machan's Beach End. It used to be 1.5 kilometres south over here, but it closed up and rediverted to over here. The Tomatoes Creek gets a lot of mention in the investigation paper. In the past, Tomatoes Creek and Riches Creek were independent of each other, but as creeks and rivers meander, they ended up joining up together and then joining the Barron River. Eventually, due to erosion, the Tomatoes Creek was becoming the Barron River's major mouth. It was found that the Tomatoes Creek was at 35% total discharge of the Barron River, and when a creek gets to 40% discharge, that it's reached a critical stage whereby it becomes too late to rectify. The task of controlling the flow and taking corrective action should be undertaken before dominance of the diversion becomes established. All dredging should have been stopped, as weakening of the river could cause flooding. Recommendations were that rock walls were put in to slow down the percentage of water going down the Tomatoes Creek. The thing that I find really interesting is that in 1928, Riches Creek, which is now the Tomatoes Creek mouth, moved 1.2 kilometres north. So I went and looked up Google Maps and I measured 1.2 kilometres, and that brings us to this point here, which is basically exactly where the river punched out after the recent floods. Several years before 1975, increasingly evidence suggested the beaches and rivers were under stress. Extraction of sand should be limited so that the beaches could be maintained. In 1957, the beach eroded 9 metres. So already back in the 1950s, they were building rock walls to try and save the northern beaches. They spend, without exaggeration, millions of dollars on trying to save the beach fronts. More than $3.3 million has been spent fighting beach erosion at Holloway's Beach alone. In 2016, $640,000 worth of sand, which was washed off the beach only weeks after it was tucked in. In 2020, $2 million it took to build 2 rock walls to further stop erosion, replacing the existing unsuccessful sandbags. In 2020, they said there was no threat to the beachfront houses that are on Hibiscus Avenue in Holloway's Beach, but if you go there today, it paints a different picture. The money spent on Machan's Beach must be astronomical, as the whole beachfront is just rocks. While the Barron River Delta was being investigated, it's flooded over 6 times in 1 year. In 1977, they had 3.5 to 4 times the average rainfall. In a very short summarized version, it was found that densely populated areas of floodplains, good management would include flood emergency, evacuation, and flood plans. The report included measures that could be undertaken to modify floods or reduce potentials of flood. They discussed in the investigation creating flood storage, levees, channel alterations, high flow diversions, and land treatment and stabilization. Other recommendations were land use regulations such as zoning, building codes, permanent evacuation, redevelopment, and floodproofing. In the summary of their findings, they said that raise the roads and the bridge 2 meters, and they found that it wouldn't cause more flooding. The Tomatoes Creek needed to be strengthened or reduce the flow to it to avoid it becoming the main channel of the Barron. Build a 4-meter high levee before Tomatoes Creek Bridge, which could eliminate local flooding, and it's recommended that flood levels be introduced for buildings. If they could carefully design ring levees, they could construct them around Holloway's and Machan's Beach without affecting other areas. I'm not sure what was done with these recommendations, but there was also a few other news articles that backed up the fact that they thought that the Barron River mouth was going to change. This article suggests that it was going to happen in a much further future. Experts are now warning that they must be very, very careful in what kind of planning and road development that they do in this section now in Holloways. I decided to find out a little bit more about the Captain Cook Highway and if any of the roads were built with flooding in mind. And then I came across this article. They're going to spend $359 million upgrading the Captain Cook Highway, and it's going to take 25 years to complete. To my utter surprise and disappointment, it has nothing to do with upgrading due to flooding. The key features of upgrade include widening the road, intersection safety, and public transport improvements. They need to spend this money building that highway up 2 meters. As per the article it states, he'd encourage anyone wanting to give their feedback on the plans, and I have done so. Which brings me to the last part of the recommendations they made, and what I think is the most important part of the recommendations: flood forecasting and management systems. The investigation paper found that survey information found that flood damage can be significantly reduced or avoided with adequate warning. Flood warning, even if just 24 hours ahead, can be very cost effective. Two recommendations that were made were flood warning systems and hydraulic modelling. On the BOM website you can find information about flood forecasting and the Barron Alert System. The Barron River Alert System was installed in 1995. It issues flood warnings whenever the Barron River at Camarunga is expected to exceed 5 metres. The target lead time is to provide 6 hours warning of flood heights exceeding this level. These warnings are updated up to every 3 hours during a flood event. The real-time alert flood reporting network in the Barron River enables flood predictions to be made earlier and with more accuracy. So it seems that the technology is there, but the information needs to get from the computer systems to the local people. In 2015, flood mapping of the Barron River Basin was done through hydraulic modelling. The objective of the study was to provide a greater understanding of flood behaviour throughout the catchment for emergency management purposes during major flood events. Modelling has been undertaken at catchment scale that is fit for flood animations. The extreme flood event for the Barron River Basin was simulated for the 6, 24, 36, 48 and 72-hour duration storm events, and the results combined for mapping purposes. During the recent flood event, in 48 hours we had 1500 millimeters of rain, so the closest one would be this one here with 1600 millimeters. This is what the findings found. 9 hours into a rain event, flooding begins at Tinaroo Falls. It takes 9 hours for the flooding to head downstream to Coranda at Myola. From Myola, it takes 3 hours to cascade down the Barron River Falls, through the gorge, and hit the delta. It takes 21 hours to get from Tinaroo Falls down to the Barron River Delta. This is the 1% AEP flood modelling. As you can see, it becomes apparent where the Barron River Delta is. From Camaronga, it can take between 1 to 3 hours before it reaches the beaches. This is the flood map for an extreme event. So I've edited this graph. I've added last year's recent flood level to the Myola flood gauge just to give you an idea of the flood comparison. So this was the level known at 6:25 p.m. I'm not sure exactly if that was the peak, but it would be close to it. They documented flooding in 1969, 1977 and 1979. It flooded twice in 1977. This is the flood map from 1977. What you would find the most intriguing if you saw all the maps is the different path that the water takes every time. It's completely different, and the flow of the water was even recorded, and it flows in completely different directions. I'd love to provide a detailed map of where the flooding happened this time, but all I can actually show you is where I sort of know where it went, which is down through my streets over here, and I know where the orange dots are. Roughly, it did not flood this time. If there's any piece of information that people can take from this, it is that don't think that your house is safe just because it did not flood this time. It is all a flood zone and the water is unpredictable. Always be prepared. A big aspect of flood forecasting and management system is the effectiveness of information and dissemination to the public. The investigation paper talks about the usefulness of flood warning systems and how it depends on the effectiveness of information getting to the public. That the more time people have, the more response and actions they can take. As the length of warning decreases, the practicality of emergency action diminishes. It was recorded that it took 3.5 to 5 hours for the water to reach from Myola to Machan's Beach in 1977 and 1979. Flooding events are very common during cyclones. On December 13th, Cyclone Jasper crossed 140 kilometers north of Cairns. From Wednesday to Saturday, we had about 400 mils of rain. At 8:30 p.m, I started to become concerned about flooding in my area. The river heights just kept increasing. At 5 a.m, I was surprised that I still didn't have any alert message on my phone. At 7:30 a.m, we received an alert message for Lake Placid, Camaronga and Caravonica. I didn't know any of the information that I know now, so when I saw this message, I didn't think it affected me. And I can speak for other people that they did not think this message was for them either. Then at 9:03 we got another alert message, which was referring to the Barron River catchment area. Then 10 minutes later we got another message that come through that was specifying Caravonica, Lake Placid and Camaronga, so we just thought that that was the Barron River catchment area. As I'm 2 kilometers away from the Barron River, I did not think that this meant me. At 11 a.m, I went to the neighbour's house to see what they thought and expressed to them that I think something bad is going to happen, and they told me to stress less. They said, "You worry too much." Then at 11:41 I walked out of their house into my yard and then saw that there was floodwaters all around us. Neighbours from everywhere were like driving up to the SES and sandbagging, but I knew it was too late. Within 36 minutes it started to flood into the yard, another 26 minutes and it was starting to enter the house. At 12:38 I moved my car to higher ground. Sometime after 2 o'clock I became quite frightened by the water level, and I decided to leave my house before the water depth was too high to be able to get out with my dog safely, and I went across the road to a double-storey house for evacuation. The last alert message that I received was at 7:53 p.m, and it was saying that Yorkeys Knob, Machen's Beach and Holloways was experiencing flooding, which was 8 hours after the water entered my house. Now, I'm not sure, because we had very bad phone reception, what time that message was actually sent or the finer details. But overall, the messages sent were not specific enough and they weren't sent in a timely manner. It's speculated that if the river didn't punch out at this point here and drain out to the ocean, that Holloways would have went far worse under. There's a lot of things that I've learnt through this experience, and there's definitely things that I would have done different and I'll do differently in the future. I do have some recommendations, and they're starting with the basic, easier things to fix within the community. I would really like to see a flood camera on the Holloways Beach Road that floods first. A flood camera on the Masons Bridge during wet season, and also flood markers so locals know when that bridge is going to flood. Timely and specific alert messages. It would be good if we had public knowledge of the Camaranga Bridge and a plotting graph. A Queensland Emergency app or a Cairns Emergency app that is a lot more detailed and specific and gets updated regularly. And seeing as though they're going to upgrade the Captain Cook Highway, they may as well be elevating that road by 2 meters, and really, like the beaches need to have their roads elevated, with Machen's Beach being the main one. And lastly, I would like to see a very detailed flood emergency plan. So I just wanted to show you and acknowledge what the Cairns Council does have in place at the moment. They have a local disaster management plan. It's not very specific to any kind of disaster, it's just very general, and it's a very small document. They have flood cameras, which are great. They have the Cairns Disaster Dashboard, which has some resources on there. If I have missed anything, I do apologise, but at the moment this was all that even the Cairns Disaster Management provided me with. I'm looking forward to seeing in the future more disaster management plans. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you enjoyed learning about the Barron River history and my own personal experience of living in the Barron River Delta. It's taken me weeks to read information about the Barron River and 2 days to edit this video. I've tried to summarise and condense the information down into a 30-minute video. It's a large and complicated topic, but I've really tried my best. Thanks for watching, and as you might know, there is another cyclone forming out in the Coral Sea, but it's expected to hit 5 hours south from here, and where I'm living at the moment, I am surrounded by the hills and perfectly safe.